listening to AchieveRadio.com. A new drummer for a new awakening.
Across the realms and around the world, welcome to Outside the Box. Tonight, your host and vessel of spirit is Nancy Zilversmit. We hope that you will learn to have the strength and courage to step outside the box and dwell with spirit, and to leave the old beliefs that hold you down behind you and rediscover your spirituality in new ways.
Hello, it's July 1st, 2015, and this show is brought to you by www.sanctuaryofsacredspace.com. Events that we have coming up, and still doing the tarot classes on Tuesday nights. We are in the court cards now. If you've taken one of my previous classes or just would like to brush up on the court cards, you may join us for a donation. Give me a call at 602-380-1171, and we will add you to the class. It's a small class, and you get a lot of individual attention in that class. So, going to continue doing the paranormal. We're doing a little series called Spiritual, Supernatural, Paranormal, and we're in the Paranormal Part 2. And next week we'll probably switch over to Supernatural. And last week we gave some of the basic description of what paranormal means. And it is the words para and normal. And this word was not used until around, well, the first use of it was around 1905, but in the English language it started being used in the 1920s. It's not in understandable terms of known scientific law or phenomenon, and it's not scientifically explainable. So it is para, which is outside and beyond, and normal, which is scientific explanation. So it is outside and beyond the scientific explanation. And last week we covered several different areas. We did the basic, what paranormal is, what the subject matter is, which was telekinesis, ghosts, poltergeists, life after death, ESP, faith healing, human auras, and so on, and psychic forces. And we went into some detail in all those different areas, and UFOs, extraterrestrials, cryptids, and your cryptids are your creatures like the Bigfoot, the Loch Ness Monster, the Chupacabra, non-bird dinosaurs, Mothman, Jersey Devil, dragons, unicorns, werewolves, things that are not explainable scientifically. We also looked at paranormal research versus some scientific versions, and we looked at the anecdotal approach, which means collections of stories of the paranormal and who made those collections, over 40,000 of them. We looked at crop circles, spontaneous fires, levitation, and a lot of other things. Alien abductions was amongst those as well, and we ended it there last week. So before we get started on that, we've had in the last week, and this is coming out of England, these news stories, and they do international news reporting as to what's going on in the different countries around the world in the last week. And there have been mysterious crop circles turned up near Stonehenge, and they're also seeing sightings of a black UFO, and so they're wondering, is this connected? UFOs, crop circles? Well, usually there supposedly are. They come and go, and they occur in flaps, and there seems to be a rash of UFO sightings right now in Peru this month as well. And in Peru, they're seeing a whole fleet of UFOs, and also in Turin, Italy, and in Spain. There are crop circles coming up all at the same time. So is this some kind of organized art project by people who are out there that do the crop circle type things, and there are people who do that, or are these crop circles the real deal? So the mystery remains. Also, there was a murder suspect who claims to be haunted by the ghost of his victim, and he says he's tried to apologizing to her apparition several times. What he did is he says, I accidentally killed this person during a robbery. I didn't mean to, but she keeps appearing and keeps appearing. And people are wondering, is this just guilt that forced him to turn himself over, or was it the manifestation of a woman who's stuck here and had unfinished business with her murderer? So one of the ghost sightings this week. Also, in Germany, they're about to release their UFO records, UFO and ET records. We did that here in the United States some time ago. Germany is now being forced to do that through their parliament. So they're going to be releasing a lot of, they're saying it's probably pretty amazing information that has been put aside and hidden for decades now. At the same time, in India, they're sharing news that they're seeing flying saucers and flying humanoids, and that it's not related to some of the other flying saucer stuff that's out there. That they'd like to see that they've got their own stories, but theirs are well photographed, and the appearance seems almost too good to be true. But they are photographed and they are documented. So you can read that for yourself. Go ahead and look it up, what's going on in India this last week with that. In the United States, of course, we've had massive triangle UFOs over New Jersey, a New Jersey town, and according to witnesses, displays the usual characteristics of the most commonly reported type of UFO, which is about 300 to 400 feet long, pitch black, non-reflective, and it's a triangular flying craft. So it's considered to be one of the more common ones. On another level, there's a farmer, and he's in also in England, in Lincolnshire, and he says that every now and then he has cauliflower that complains and moans and creaks, and he says it's due to a lack of nutrients, and it causes the plants to cry out. So yeah. It's something that happens there. So he says, incidentally, the loudest cauliflower it has ever been has been this last year. Everything dried up in one big gust of wind overnight, and it was also reported in India as well, and that it killed their plants and caused trees to wilt and brown within a few hours. So what is this? Is it a natural phenomenon, or is this something that has to do with the chemicals in the air? Is it burned? Is it radiated? Is it scorched? And they say that the plants in India seem to be scorched on one side, not all over, just on one side. Okay, and it's also killing off animals like chickens. So they're not really happy about that. Okay. Last week I talked a little bit about animals appearing in weird places, paranormally, raining down from the skies. Well, they did have that happen in Canada. Fish rained down. They had it in India, and then something else happened to Canada. So they had fish raining down in India. And it was like the Toto song, I Miss the Fish Rains Down in India. Anyway, the critters didn't so much as fall from the sky, but got swept along the rising waters of the monsoon fattened waterways. Piggybacking on this story is the one from Canada. Okay, the Canadian fish story that says that they've got goldfish eating up potential sewer alligators. Okay, I don't know how goldfish can eat an alligator, but it must be very large goldfish and very small alligators, if that's if that's what that is. Okay, and let's see. Moving on, there was so much in the news this week. I just decided I'm just going to read a few of them because I've got like 5 pages of it here. Anyway, so we had another one of these questions that are being asked. Why do people believe in unidentified flying objects, aliens, and abductions? Well, the answer to the question is that people nowadays are open to new ideas. And when they're open to the concepts of UFOs and ETs, and social media plays a huge part in the modern day sharing of these experiences. So, although the U.S. gets the majority of attention for UFO sightings across the country of the United States, there are sightings in every corner of the world. Turkey is considered to be one of the top 5 hotspots of UFO sightings in the world, and there are many well-documented encounters with pilots and other trusted witnesses. So the UFO phenomenon continues to attract public attention in Turkey. And not to be outdone, Peru is steadily climbing the ranks of the world's hotspots of UFO sightings. And with a rash of very recent sightings, which I already talked about, of the flotilla of UFOs. And they say that it resembles the Phoenix Lights. If you know anything about the story about the Phoenix Lights here in Phoenix, many years ago, we had many UFOs appear in the skies, and it's the fire in the skies, I think they called it. They made a film about it. Okay, and one other thing, people seem to go around and claim that when they are looking at a person, they're seeing the face of another person over their face, and they can't recognize who the person is. Well, actually, there are 175 million people worldwide who suffer from prosopagnosia. It's a condition that prevents sufferers from recognizing faces, sometimes even their own. One famous person who has this is Brad Pitt, and there is no known cure. So it's a little different from pareidolia, which one sees faces where there are none. Okay, it inevitably makes life difficult for those who must endure it. So one is a paranormal thing, the other one is a physical condition in which they cannot recognize faces. So we. I'm just dumping the paper on the floor because I have a lot of paper this week. So anyway, I'm also doing at the end of the last half hour, I will also take requests for readings, and if you have any questions on the subject matter that we're talking about today, that is also okay. I will take questions as well. So. Getting back to paranormal part 2, now that we've gotten the news out of the way, this week we're going to start on the psychology of the paranormal, and there is a category of psychology. It's called anomalistic psychology, paranormal phenomenon that have naturalistic explanations resulting from psychological and physical factors, and sometimes given the impression of paranormal activities some people. And in fact, where there has been no paranormal activity. Now, which means that they think that it might be all in your mind. They call it magical thinking, mental imagery, subjective validation, and coincidence, with hidden causes and sometimes fraud. So this is how psychology looks at a lot of the experiences of the paranormal. But when a person is having a real paranormal experience, you aren't going to be able to convince them otherwise. If they are not only seeing something but feeling it, they're being affected by it, something's going across the room or being thrown across the room, or other activity is happening, you are not going to convince a person that they are having a psychological problem. Though there are psychological problems in which they would be seeing these kinds of things. So it's a matter of personal belief, and there's a lot of people who have the real paranormal experiences, and they're afraid to go talk to somebody about it, especially a psychologist or a psychiatrist, either or, because they're afraid they're going to get drugged. And then there you have the other group of people who are having a lot of negativity happening with their experiences that they would rather not have to deal with, and they'd rather be drugged. So it goes both ways. It depends on who you're dealing with. Some people actually have a problem with their biological being, and other times it's not that, it's a spiritual or energetic phenomenon. But I have found that, and I taught, I've been teaching over the years, when I teach a healing class or an exorcism class, which is an advanced healing class, that when a person comes to you and say that they have all these things happening to them, and they're not able to produce evidence, and there's not any paranormal stuff going on while they're explaining it to you, or that you're questioning them, because a lot of times when I'm doing the interview face to face with a person, actually stuff will happen in the room. Then you know you've got the real deal. Then you've also got to ask, have you seen any doctors? Have you seen a physical doctor, a psychologist, a psychiatrist? What have you done? Some kind of counseling. Have you been to a church? Have you talked with your religious clergy? So if they've gone through a lot of that and they're still having issues and nobody can prove anything, it's usually a paranormal thing. But you have to look at the different scientific versions. Both, if you take care of the spiritual issue, then the biological issue is treatable, and then they can go back to see their own doctor as to the biological issue. The problem that comes with that is also is whether or not the person keeps inviting this kind of phenomenon in, whether or not it's psychological or if it's an actual phenomenon. If it's actual phenomenon and they keep inviting it back in, and we get what are called repeaters for people who actually want help, they invite it in because they like the attention, they like they like something happening in their life. They think that it's boring. Life is boring unless they've got something going on, and then it gets to the point where they can't handle it, and then they need to run to somebody for help. And then we got what we call the repeaters. And repeaters can only be helped so much. If they don't want to help themselves and to stay away from this type of phenomenon, then they don't wish to change. And that's the thing. They don't wish to change. Then you can only do so much for them. And it's basically teach them what they can do for themselves. And if they keep inviting it in and they keep having issues, and it's not a psychological thing. Well, if they keep inviting it in, it's got to be partially psychological, because they're wanting that attention. They're wanting that attention either from the spiritual being or and the phenomenon, or from the human beings who are trying to help this person. So it's like the woe is me. But yeah, you just invited it in again. I've cleaned you up 4 times, and what have you been doing? Well, I get bored. I got it, and I just want to see what's out there. And I said, I can't help you anymore because you do not wish to be helped, and you don't wish to be, you don't wish to change. And I've turned people down before because of that kind of attitude. You can only do so much for a person. And it's basically, I've had people send me people like that and not tell me that they're repeaters, and then go through the experience once or twice with them, and then call the other person back who gave the referral and going, you do understand this is a person that is inviting in all this phenomenon. And I go, oh yeah, they're good for the money. Well, not in my book. if you can't take care of them, and if they aren't willing to change to take care of themselves, then there's nothing I can do with them. I don't care how good they are for the money. I am not going to sit there and do that to a person. I will basically explain to them what's going on, what I'm observing, that I know that they have a history, and I am not going to treat them, period. They are on their own. So, yes, sometimes you have to turn people down. I don't care how good their money is. If they're doing it just for attention and not to get rid of the problem, then I'm not their person. Okay. So many studies have found a link between personality and psychopathology of variables correlating with paranormal belief. Some studies have also shown fantasy proneness, which correlates positively with the paranormal belief. You'll find that a lot of the people who have the fantasy proneness will be people who do the Dungeons and Dragons, they'll do Magic the Gathering, they'll do the different Warhammer and other such role-playing games of several sorts. And you'll find that a lot of their stories and stuff, if you're familiar with some of the role-playing games, a lot of their stories and stuff, and I've had people call me and they start off with this stuff, and it's suddenly I'm catching keywords that are role-playing games, and I'll suddenly hit those keywords into Google because I'll either be on a headset or a phone in front of a computer when I'm doing a phone interview, and I'm pulling up the stuff that they're talking about, and I'm going, oh, that's Warhammer, oh, that's this, that's that, and that's Magic the Gathering. And it'll catch them because they're weaving their fantasy life in to their supposed paranormal experiences. I'm going, yeah, that's so-and-so. That's the general in this game, blah, blah, blah. Or they'll use specific names, and they'll think that, I don't know what the hell I'm hearing from them. But, you Google things. Keep yourself informed on this type of stuff. Is it something that's real, or is it just the magical belief that they have? Also, research has associated paranormal belief with low cognitive ability, low IQ, and lack of science education. Also, intelligent, highly educated participants involved in surveys have proven to have less paranormal belief. I know people that have degrees and that are extremely intelligent, have high IQs, that also have paranormal beliefs. So I don't believe this entirely. It's not the hick out in the cornfield, the redneck out there that's getting visited by the UFOs. Highly intelligent people also get that. So it just depends on who they are. And where they're located at the time that it happens. If you're out in the country, I don't care if you've got the top IQ or you've got the lowest IQ. If there's a phenomenon happening, and you're gonna experience it. So I don't think IQ has anything to do with it. The naysayers, of course, will say that it does. They say that college students with better grades have less belief in the paranormal, unless they've actually experienced it. Some of the paranormal phenomenon actually happens on college campuses. Yeah, if you're hearing a cat howling in the background, that's one of my cats complaining. Yep, there he is. He's complaining. Okay. They don't like it when I have them on the other side of the house while I'm doing the radio show. But anyway, moving on with that. Those who have paranormal belief, they seem to be poorly educated. This was a study done in the 1970s. I'd say that's not true anymore. They also said that they were unemployed and have roles that rank low in social values. So they're trying to downplay a lot of the fact that paranormal activity does happen. And paranormal belief does happen in the more educated ranks of society as well. Let's see. They seem to think that fundamental individual differences of paranormal belief is a neuroticism. And while the paranormal belief is independent of extroversion or psychoticism. The correlation has been found between paranormal belief and irrational thinking. Okay, I know a lot of people who are not irrational that do have paranormal belief, myself included here. So it depends on the study that's being done, when the study was done. And there was another study that was done in 1985. They said that the people that have the paranormal belief are also narcissists. They have a narcissistic personality. I don't agree with that either. I do know a few people that are narcissists, but I know a lot of very nice, humble people who have paranormal beliefs as well. And the majority, I find, are not narcissists. There is a hypothesis, and I wish one day I'm going to get these braces out, hopefully in the next 6 months to a year, that asserts that people believe in the paranormal because they are uneducated or stupid, and we've just discussed that. Beliefs exist to provide a way to cope in the face of psychological uncertainties or physical stressors. So in other words, if they can't handle daily life, there's a lot of stress going on, the world's caving in on them, they're going to suddenly have paranormal activity going on. I don't find that to be true in all cases. There are cases where if you do have a lot of stress going on in your life, you might get some poltergeist activity going on. But it is said that that's usually caused by the person's own energy. A lot of the poltergeist activity that has been claimed over the years, they've said that it's usually teenagers that are going into the onset of puberty, and they're blaming that change in their energy as to the poltergeist phenomenon that's going on around them. That's not always true either. A lot of times the poltergeist phenomenon is an actual entity or entities or spirits that are doing it. When a person is sensitive due to stress or hormonal changes or something else going on in their life, they've had a loss, sometimes they are more susceptible to this kind of activity going on, the paranormal activity, the spirits and everything, because of the energy that they have, which makes them vulnerable because of either trauma or stress or what other things that they have going on, including physical. If you have a physical issue, several years ago, and I think I've talked about it a couple times on the radio show, several years ago, I had some major surgery done, and I came home on Halloween, and I had been, in the paranormal world, dealing with stuff for years, and I was doing I still had the radio show back then. This was quite a few years ago, and I went home that night. I went to bed. There was banging at my door. I was physically not at my best because I had just had major surgery. I'd been in the hospital for a week. I was still, had stitches and pain and all kinds of stuff. I wasn't taking any pain pills or anything, but a lot of loud banging at my door. My husband was still asleep. I went into the other room where my sons were sleeping together. That's when they still shared a bedroom. And they were much younger, and I woke them up. I said, "Do you hear the banging?" And they said, "No." Okay, so I went out into the living room. There's banging going on in the front door again, and it's basically there's nobody out there. You take a peek out the window, peeked out my son's bedroom window, then peeked out the bay window and near the front door. Nobody physically is there, but there's banging going on the door. Because I was in a weakened condition, whatever it was testing me as to whether or not I would open that door and let it in. The thing is I had to stand there and go, you know what? I understand it's Halloween. I'm in a weakened position from surgery. You are not allowed in my house. Go away. And it stopped because I would not allow it in. If I had allowed it in, who knows what kind of hell would have broke loose in my house. So it's like you have to sometimes just say no to the phenomenon. Okay, so sometimes when people have phenomenon, it's because they're in a vulnerable state, and the spirits will know it. The spirits know it, and what they're going to do is they're going to go after that energy that you have in a vulnerable state. It strengthens them. What you're doing is you're feeding. It's like feeding the animals. You don't feed the animals, don't feed the entities either. So don't feed the negativity, which will feed off of your trauma, off your stress, off your vulnerability. Okay, so moving on. We have a study that was done, a psychological study, and it involved 174 members of the Society for Psychical Research, and you had to complete a delusional ideation questionnaire and a deductive reasoning task. Fancy terms for just filling out a questionnaire. Okay, and as predicted, the study showed that individuals who reported a strong belief in the paranormal made more errors and displayed more disillusional ideation than skeptical individuals. Are they saying that because you believe in the paranormal, you're not intelligent? Okay. There is also a reasoning bias, and it doesn't have a year on this. I wish it had a year on this. Okay. There's also a reasoning bias, which is limited to people who reported believing in rather than experiencing paranormal phenomenon. There's a difference. You can believe in it, but never have experienced it. If you experience it, of course, you're going to believe in it, unless you're one of these highly skeptical people that's going to look around and go, hey, I don't believe in it. Let's find out why not. It's like I've been having a lot of weird stuff happening at my house in the last few months. The most recent was, and it's just I've got light on this side. I usually have shadow over on this side because this side, since I moved in this house, the electrical on this entire wall has not worked. And I've resisted paying an electrician to tear out my walls. And I've just been using all the electrical from the other side of the room. And this last week, I got woke up in the middle of the night, and I came out into my office because this is where I felt like I was being drawn to. I came out into my office. Everybody was asleep because people had to get up at 3 a.m. to go to work. The other one has to get up at 5 a.m. to go to work. And so they're sleeping. They're done. They're out. And I had been awake until about 1 a.m. and went to sleep. And then about an hour later, I get woke up and I get pulled out into my office. The lights are on. 4 years, these lights have not worked. The lights are on. They now work. Who knows why? Who knows why? I've had people look at it. I've refused to allow anybody to tear it out. But suddenly, the electrical on this whole wall is suddenly working after 4 years. So tell me about that. Also have had a lot of other things going on, but been taking action on them. And getting rid of things, one thing after another. Not aliens, though. Not aliens. I've had different waves of vermin and insects. And the last one was my entire bathroom wall was suddenly buzzing. Okay? And it's a brick wall. It's a brick wall. So, yeah. Had to get rid of a hive and then a swarm. And been doing that on my own. That is done. But other things. If you watch my Facebook, you hear me complain about these things as I'm taking care of them. And sometimes you have to physically take care of them. Why are you suddenly going through a lot of these trials? Okay, so sometimes they include physical phenomenon. And if you've ever read about some of the incidences that have to do with spirit hauntings or entities that really don't want you in a certain place for whatever reasons, insects and vermin show up. Insects and vermin. They suddenly just appear in a house. So I've been having to deal with that at this time. Hopefully I am at the other end of that and it's almost finished. So a lot of challenges going on. Okay, there is also research showing that suggesting that reasoning abnormalities may have had a casual role in the formation of a paranormal belief. Reasoning abnormalities. I've had a lot of physical stuff happen, so it's not reasoning for me. Anyway, the research showed that people reporting contact with aliens have a higher level of absorption, disassociativity, fantasy proneness, and the tendency to hallucinate. Wow. Okay. Yeah, and Germany is releasing all their information on what they consider real in those areas. So, little of this, little of that. Specific cases that paranormal belief acts as a psychodynamic coping function, serves as a mechanism for coping with stress. Yeah, I've actually known people like that. If they can't deal with the stress, it's not that they have multiple personalities. That's a little different than having multiple entities. What they do is, and they're like a volunteer possession. That's the only way I can look at their relationship with the entities. There are people that have an actual psychological problem with multiple personalities. And everybody knows of the Sybil case. Well, then there are the ones that have the multiple entities, which are entirely different. They walk, they talk, they speak, they sound different, they move differently. Their energy, you can actually feel the difference in the energy. So they have the human soul, if they don't want to deal with something, because it's stressing them out. If they don't want to deal with something, and one of these entities go, okay, I'll deal with it. And they learn how to cope that way. And it's almost parallels the multiple personality thing, where if a person doesn't want to deal with specific things going on in life, the other personality will come forward. The same thing with the entity issue. So they will, I don't want to deal with it. It's a coping mechanism. Blah, blah, blah is going to come forward. Sometimes they'll stop and they'll tell you, I'm going to let so-and-so come forward and just deal with it, and because I don't want to deal with it. And then I'll ask, well, what are you going to do? Sleep? But your body's going to be active, and there's something else controlling it and all this other thing, and what you're doing is you're shutting off. So, and he just calls it sleep. So it's very interesting working with those kind of cases. And I know a few of them, actually. So, coping mechanism. Survivors from childhood sexual abuse, violence, and unsettled home environments have reported higher levels of paranormal belief. Belief and activity are two different things, and they're not talking about the activity. They're talking about the belief. So you've got to take a look at that too. They're just looking at belief. You have to actually look at the activity that's going on. And they're saying that those people who have a history of childhood trauma also have dissociative symptoms, which is the multi-personality thing. Develop paranormal beliefs that to help provide an enhanced sense of control. So, it's so I don't have control, so here's another personality that's going to come forward, or here's an entity that's going to come forward, or whatever. It's whatever. That other is going to, and we call it an other. The other is going to deal with the situation. So Does happen. Does happen. Gender differences in surveys. Okay, gender differences in surveys on the paranormal belief have reported women scoring higher than men overall. Yeah, just blame it all on the women. A lot of the people I know are male that are having a lot of the paranormal activity stuff going on. But anyway, women scored higher than men overall, and men have a greater belief in UFOs and extraterrestrials than women do. Maybe they're just more choice to be taken by an alien and probed. Who knows? Surveys have also investigated the relationship between ethnicity and paranormal belief. A sample of American university students found that it was blacks have a higher level of belief in superstition and witchcraft, while belief in extraterrestrial life forms is stronger among whites. Wow. Okay, I know a lot of the pagan community in the Phoenix area, and I've attended a lot of their different activities. I'm not a member, but I have been invited on occasions over the years, and they are not of. There are a few blacks, there are a few Hispanics. I've seen some Native American. But the great majority that have the superstitions and the belief system and and practice the witchcraft and everything are white. Are white. So maybe it depends on where the testing is being done for some of these surveys. Singapore University students were found that Chinese, Indian, and Malay students different in their paranormal beliefs. And the Chinese students showed greater skepticism. This was back in 1984. With the skepticism, you got to understand that the Chinese were coming out under the communist rule, where it was pretty much atheistic. So there was a lot of skepticism before they were allowed to. And I think there's still some issues over there now with control and stuff. But before they're allowed to even go back to some of their spiritual or religious beliefs, some of the ancient religions, the older religions. So the Chinese showed a greater skepticism. That would be very different from India, and that would also be very different from Indonesian, Malaysian, where they've got a lot more of religious beliefs, spiritual beliefs, and practices. So there would be a great difference about that with the skepticism. According to American surveys, the highest belief in the paranormal, while the findings are not uniform, general trend is for whites to show lesser belief in paranormal subjects. Well, okay. I get a lot of white. I get a lot of ethnic as well. So to me, it's like all across the board. It's across the board. Schizophrenic patients have more belief in psychic phenomenon than healthy adults. I've had people who've actually have had real psychic phenomenon, real entities, real problems, and experiences, and they're basically healthy adults, but then physically, because they've allowed a lot of this to go on with them over the years, the body has become unhealthy. Well, they also picked up some very unhealthy habits too. So when you pick up a lot of unhealthy habits and your body tends to degrade. Well, that happens with anybody. It doesn't have to have any paranormal activity or anything going on with that. But if you don't take care of yourself, you're not going to be a healthy adult. I've taken and had people who've had so many physical issues that they literally could not work anymore, and they have a lot of paranormal stuff going on, a lot of spirit stuff going on. Whether it was positive or negative or a combination of both, it was physically wearing and stressful on them, where I've actually told them, you get your medical records, go see a psychiatrist, go see a psychologist, whatever it takes, apply for Social Security, get some help. And if they go in, and if they're one of these people that have the multiple spirits that will channel through them, and they've made the discussion with them beforehand before going in to seeing the doctor, and they have no control over it, then actually the psychologist, psychiatrist, whoever the doctor is going to ask them questions, and sometimes it's not going to be the person who's answering. So they get diagnosed as bipolar, as schizophrenic, whatever. They end up on their Social Security. They end up getting their Social Security because their physical problems, even though they have been so degenerating to the physical body and nothing was getting any better, could not get disability, could not get the disability that they needed. They could no longer function or work in the real world. So it's just take your spirits and go in, let them give you a diagnosis of schizophrenia, bipolar, whatever they're going to give you, and you are automatically going on disability. But don't want to be in their shoes. Don't want to be in their shoes. They're also saying that under neuroscience that there are underlying formation of paranormal beliefs because of neurocognitive process. So, in other words, you got something wrong with your head. They measure electronic brain activity during resting periods, and they look for differentials. And they did a lot of studies in that, looking for asymmetry and perturbations. What they're looking at is that they're looking for problems that happen during fetal development, and they're saying because they may have some functioning problems with the electrical activity in the brain, then that is why they have the paranormal belief going on. And so they're trying to explain it away. You were born with it. It's like it's like the theory that, and I've got a cat just complaining loudly. Oh my gosh. He must have got locked out of a room and wants to get in there. Anyway, what they do is they try to explain away your paranormal beliefs and blame it on something that happened before you were born. Like some of the scientific studies that have been done in recent years, saying that the belief in God is hardwired in the brain. So what they're basing that on is not only is the belief system of God hardwired in the brain, you're going to believe in some divine power, that you came from somewhere, that you were created by something, that there's got to be something out there greater than us. They're saying that in this other study that paranormal belief falls somewhere along those same lines. They were hardwired in their fetal development, that they have the belief in the paranormal, that which is beyond science, because they were born with this issue in their head. Okay, so it's a brain issue. It's realized that people with higher dopamine levels have the ability to find patterns and meanings when in reality there isn't any. There isn't any. So if you've got a high dopamine level, that's a natural occurrence in your brain, you are going to find patterns and meanings in a reality where there isn't any. Wow, I'm wondering if they do those studies on these genius people, like if Einstein had still been around, if he was still alive today, and other people that have genius abilities where they could find patterns and meanings where in reality supposedly there isn't any, or these people who were called crazy, would they find higher dopamine levels in these people? It's very interesting question, because they're saying high dopamine levels mean paranormal belief. I'd say look at the geniuses that are out there and the spiritual people and other people. There's a lot of criticism promoting paranormal claims out there, a lot of it. And we're constantly being exposed to films, newspapers, documentaries, books endorsing paranormal claims, and critical coverage is largely absent. In other words, the naysayers are largely absent. If you Google it, you will come up with skeptics that are out there. There's a lot of skeptics out there. I got a review on a little free book that I put up on Smashwords years ago, and it's still out there, and it's also in iTunes. If you plug in my name, it'll come up. It's a little free book on what to do when you're touched by darkness. And on Smashwords, people are allowed to go in and read it, download it, whatever. It's free. And this one guy, he just went in and he tore it apart, saying that I was a fake and a fraud and I must be charging people. Well, the book is free, for crying out loud. And all this other crap. And then what I did is I did a back research on who this person was and went into his biographical thing. He's an atheist. He's a skeptic. He just and I looked at his other reviews. You can search for other reviews that they've done. It didn't matter what subject matter it was. If it had to do with religion or spiritualism or paranormal or whatever, he just tore them up. So he was just in there to make trouble. It didn't fit into his belief of the world, and so he just liked to get in and tear people up. So it's there. It's still there. So anyway, people have usually called it quasi-religious phenomenon, manifestation of transcendental temptation, tendency of people to seek a transcendental reality that cannot be known by using methods of science. And so it's compared to a primitive form of magical thinking. And it's also considered consumer fraud, that people are being induced through false claims to spend their money, often in large sums, on paranormal claims that do not deliver as they promise. This person has obviously not ever had a real experience. Not ever had a real experience. It's what I say about atheists too. The only reason that an atheist is the way they are, other than to keep the rest of us all in check and to question reality, is that they haven't had the experience. So, belief polls. This is the last thing I'm going to hit on tonight. Belief polls. The validity of the existence of paranormal phenomenon is controversial, debated passionately by both proponents of paranormal and by the skeptics. And so, what part of the population believes and what doesn't? I'm going to go with the latest, which was done in 2006. 56% of the people believed in psychic and spiritual healing. 28% believe in ESP, 40% believe in haunted houses, 40% in demonic possession, 39% believe in ghosts, 24% believe in telepathy. And then everything else falls under that. Clairvoyance and prophecy, also 24%. Witches, 26%. Mediumship, 16%. Astrology, 17%. And reincarnation, only 15% of the population. I promised that I would do a reading today. There was one person that requested a reading actually last week, and I told him I'd hold off. I would do it this week. And he just wanted a spirit reading. This was Louis. I think it was Louis. Basically, Louis, please use your head. There are temptations that are going to happen to you. You have been a person who's done lifelong learning in the spiritual matters, and also you have trust in your source, which is the divine power. You've made your mark. You've worked a lot with spirit, and that has been observed. And you've had to play many roles with that. So, you know the signs. You know the what happens. You feel it. You're aware of it. You know of it, and you know how it influences your life. Okay. They're saying that in the matter of which you are thinking of, you will have success if you get off your lazy ass. I'm sorry, that's what comes through. Because of the fact that you've been dragging your feet, there's been postponements in achieving your dreams to a level that you want it to happen at. You need to listen to the inner voice that you have, your own intuition, and stop listening to that part of you which likes to condemn yourself, question yourself, and cause you to have feelings of guilt, which are then projected on others around you. And you also seem to pick up on others' projections as well of their energy and of their negativeness. So what you need to do instead is stop and take a deep breath, listen to the guidance of your angels and your other spirits that work with you, and so you can move into that part of life where you have celebration. And that's all I have for today. So I will see you next week, and we will talk about supernatural next week, which is different from paranormal.
You're listening to AchieveRadio.com. A new drummer for a new awakening.